Hey, what is going on, everybody? It's the Mexinadian, or Anthony, if you do prefer. Welcome back to the one out of many, many podcasts to talk about anything RPG related, whether it be video games or tabletop RPGs. Did you guys like that intro? Because I sure as shit didn't. I'm going to cut this act out now. So welcome back to RPG Speak, everybody. I know it's been a while. But if you guys watched my last video and the pilot episode, you would know the whole situation of me working outside of doing this podcast and, you know, my personal life, stuff like that. You guys know the whole situation and why this isn't a scheduled thing. And I don't want to do the whole, you know, record 3 episodes at once and then schedule them to post whenever. I don't like that. I like things to be current, and I know if I do that, I'll end up missing something, and when I'm able to cover it, it'll end up being too late. So I do have another retro version of RPG Speak that'll be coming out in, you know, either next week or the week after, just so that way you guys do have your fill. I didn't want to release a retro episode right after another retro episode, because that's not what those are supposed to be. Retro episodes are supposed to be fillers for when I don't have any new content for you guys. They're not supposed to be, you know, one after another, because then it just makes me look like I'm not trying. Which I truly am trying to, you know, get this whole thing put together. It, you know, it takes time that I don't have. Thankfully, I do have time today. If you guys hear something in the background, which you shouldn't be able to, but if you do, it's because I've got a fan going, like usual, because it is fucking hot as shit in my room, because I don't have AC. So, but that's besides the point. Today's topic is going to be my worst experiences being a dungeon master. And for the sake of this episode, I will not be using the real names of anybody who, you know, I didn't talk with this about before, or who didn't give me consent or stuff like that. Largely because I don't want their names getting out there. I will be using names, you know, that I've used before, you know, guys like Dustin and Jacob, stuff like that. I'll be using their names because you guys are familiar with them. I have talked about them quite often on my various, you know, media channels. But some of the other people who I have never talked about before, who, you know, have played with me or played under me, stuff like that, I will not be using their real names because I like my privacy, and I really don't think they would like me, you know, either talking shit about them, painting them in a bad light, or just putting their stuff out there for, you know, however many of you guys watch this to see. So for the sake of this, I will not be using any real names other than the ones you already know, which at this point is like 3 or 4 people. So for this first story, we are going to be using... It's probably the most recent bad game I've ever had to DM. And we're gonna go... This, I say it's the most recent, but this was like, I don't know, probably 5-ish, 6-ish years ago. Maybe, I can't remember. When did I graduate? No, this is probably about 5 years ago. Because I graduated something like that. But the point is, this is the most recent bad, you know, DMing story I have. And the main topic of the main subject I'm going to be referring to as Tony, and I'll make up some other random names for everybody else that was there. So, or I might have just used names, who knows. So basically, I am a D&D and Deadlands Dungeon Master. Those are the 2 games I am very familiar with. Those are the 2 games I am more comfortable running and feel confident in running. Have I wanted to run other games? Yes, I have actually been looking into the Star Wars, you know, the Star Wars tabletop RPG to run something on that. And, you know, there are a few other systems that I'm looking into to try and run with. As of right now, the only 2 systems I am confident in being a competent DM in is Deadlands and D&D. So I was asked to run a Deadlands campaign for a few of my friends, one of them being Dustin, and then some of our other friends, you know, Tony, this other guy, another one will go by the name of Jake, I don't know. Point is, there was the agreed upon number for this group was supposed to be 3. We were going to go to Tony's house. I was going to run it there. He had a place all set up for us in his basement, stuff like that. And I get there, and lo and behold, unbeknownst to me, 2 more people were joining the group. There were 3 other people there. One of them wasn't interested in playing, which, you know, I didn't care about. And The other two, I had no clue even fucking existed. I showed up with Dustin and our other friend Jake, and we went in there. You know, he took us. This is gonna sound weird, but he took us to the basement. We were getting set up. I noticed these guys were there, but they were all playing like Super Mario 64 or Smash Brothers, something like that. It was a Mario game. I can't remember. But they were all playing that, and I was like, that's cool. You know, they'll probably come over, check it out, stuff like that. But they're just staying over there for now. So we're getting set up and stuff like that. I'm going over my notes. Tony and Jake had to create characters because they didn't have characters at the time. Well, Jake had a character at the time, but I may or may not have lost his character sheet while I was moving a bunch of stuff around, because I have run an incredibly large amount of campaigns that I've never finished. You know, the whole stereotype around, you know, gaming is that you will never finish a campaign. I have run so many campaigns that I've never successfully run a single level 1 to 20 campaign, which I know isn't huge, because my DM right now, Renavian, he's never run he's never run a level 1 to 20 campaign in general. He's gotten close, but he has not been able to completely run completely run and complete a custom homebrew level 1 to 20 campaign. Thankfully, in Deadlands, there are no levels. There's, you know, some other ways that you can upgrade your skills, stuff like that, but there are no levels. It is literally just a post-apocalyptic survival game where you actually hone your skills to survive. But so I went over there and I brought 2 character sheets, enough for Jake and Tony to create their characters. And so I start handing them out, and we're getting into the process, and all of a sudden Tony goes, "Oh yeah, these 2 guys are also going to be joining us." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" Okay. This is a bit of a shock, but you know, I'm an inclusive DM, I guess. I'm like, fine, whatever. You know what? I wasn't prepared for it, but part of being a DM is, you know, being prepared for the, you know, what you don't know is being prepared for the unexpected again. I get, you know, expecting the unexpected, essentially. So we ended up going from a group of 3 to a group of 5 in a matter of 30 seconds. I only had 2 character sheets, and there was no printer in the house that I could use, so I just pulled out some fucking lined paper, and we made custom character sheets, I guess. Essentially, I just had them write down what was on the character sheet, stuff like that, and it wasn't like, it was literally just lined paper with their skills and stuff on it. But the biggest problem with this group was Justin and Jake. No, not Dustin and Jake. Jake and Tony. Dustin's not bad. I don't know why I said Justin either. Justin doesn't exist in this story. But Dustin and Jake, they ended up being very impatient with the whole process, because Deadlands is not a very fast character creation process. You know, it's not nearly as fast as D&D. You know, D&D, you've got your set character classes, set character races, set character, you know, you basically get your set classes and set races that you can choose. Your set classes have, you know, your subclasses that allow you to get more abilities, and then you have your 5 core stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom. And then you got your abilities, you know, like your athletics, your stealth, stuff like that. Then you put your weapons down, you got your background, stuff like that. That stuff, it can literally be all predetermined in the book if you don't customize your character. But in Deadlands, they do have what is called archetypes. I did a video on this in my top 5 non-D&D games to play video. And, you know, I talked about it in my top 5 D&D games explained episode of the podcast of RPG Speak. But essentially with Deadlands, you've got, I think, if I remember correctly, if I had a character sheet right now, it's hard for me to remember how many exactly there are. I think there's 10 base attributes, not skills, attributes. You got your cognition, deafness, quickness, nimbleness, spirit, strength, and I can't remember the other one. I know this is making me look really bad, seeing as I said I'm confident and how I run Deadlands and also know the game well, but I can't remember shit because I am recording this right now at 6:30 in the morning. So bear with me here. But basically, you fill those out, and then since there's so many abilities, you basically are creating your character to the exact way that you want it to be. Now, like I said, there are archetypes, which are basically the classes in the game, but you could choose those if you want, but most people don't because of how much freedom Deadlands actually gives you to create the game, to create your character. But in Deadlands, not only do you have your abilities and attributes, you've got edges and hindrances that you have to get. You have to take 10 points of an edge or a hindrance, of edges and hindrances. So 20 points in total. You have to have at least 10 points in edges and at least 10 points in hindrances. That's it. Then you've also got, your weapons and stuff like that. You got to pick that out. And you actually have to buy all of your weapons. You don't just get your weapons handed to you. You roll dice, and you get a certain amount of money to spend at the beginning of the games. You get weapons, a vehicle if you have the money, stuff like that. You can take edges and hindrances that'll, help you with that right at the beginning of the game. But you have to roll and get it and for your money, and then buy your equipment in order to actually play the game. Now you can save your money and not buy that equipment right now and go fucking bare knuckle if you want and naked, but the point is you have to strategize and think really about how you want your character to play. So it's a little bit more of a complicated process to create your character, so it's not a very short process is what I'm getting at. And Jake and Tony, they are very, very impatient when it comes to this stuff. Tony was so impatient, because first of all, we weren't even able to start until, I wasn't even able to get there until, I think it was 7, maybe 8 o'clock at night. And it's going to take at least 2 hours. I planned on it taking at least an hour to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours the longest, to get these two guys, get Jake and Tony's characters created, because I only had one book to use. But now we're adding 2 more people in, which is going to take even longer to create a character with. So essentially what turned into what I planned on it being maybe a 1.5 hour to 2 hour ordeal ended up turning into 4 or 5 hours. Because the 2 people that joined in have never played Deadlands before. I don't even remember if they played D&D before. So I was explaining the rules and everything. I had to explain the rules and stuff like that. And, Jake and Todd, I can't remember his fucking name already. Sorry, I forgot it. But now he's Todd. Jake and Todd, they were... Sorry, I hit my mic. They started getting impatient because they really wanted to play. And I was like, it's not my fault you decided to bring 2 people in without telling me, essentially. Jake didn't have any say in that. Even he was surprised when there was going to be 2 other people. But Todd knew. He brought them in, and he didn't think to tell me that there were going to be 2 more players than what I was expecting. I had created a campaign for 3. It was basically going to be a one-shot adventure. And I had created a one-shot adventure specifically for 3 people. Not 5, not 2, 3 people. So I had to rework half the adventure just to fit in these extra 2 people, which I didn't have too much of a problem with, because like I said, I'm a DM. I expect the unexpected. I can change things on the fly. It's not that difficult. My problem was that they were so impatient. Todd specifically was so impatient that he didn't even complete his character sheet fully, because he had given the actual character sheet for Deadlands that I printed out for him to one of the other guys, so that way he could better view what everything was. So Todd was using a piece of lined paper, and he was so impatient because I needed them to have that paper have everything that was on the original character sheet. But he was so impatient that he only wrote down the skills that he wanted to use and had points in. The problem with that, and I didn't notice that he did it until the problem arose, The problem with that is that even if you still have the possibility to use a skill that you don't have any attribute points in, and I need to know where that attribute falls under, so that way I can instill the proper rules for you to use. If you guys don't know, if you use in Deadlands, if you use an ability that you don't have any points in, you basically half the amount of what the actual attribute for that category is. So Deadlands uses was the D20 system or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically Deadlands uses as many dice as possible. And for your attributes, say your quickness will end up being, 5d6. So that means you roll 5 die 6 for a quickness check, and then you take the highest one. If it rolls an ace, then you roll it again, and you keep rolling. I think you can roll a maximum of like 5 times. You can ace a maximum of 5 times before it cuts off. I'll have to double check that. But so essentially, you need to know where that attribute falls, so that way, if you use an ability that you aren't proficient in, or in other words, don't have any points in, you basically use half of what your actual ability is. What the attribute dice is. So if you had 5 die 6 and quickness, and you used a skill in quickness that you didn't have points into, then you would slash it, round down, so you would be using 2d6 instead. So stuff like that. There was also, the problems of like lying and stuff like that. I don't think there was any lying going on or fudging rolls, shit like that. But those are the problems that in my brain would have arose. And I didn't realize that he had done this until a roll came up where he had to roll something, and he's like, I don't have that on my sheet. And I'm like, how do you not have that on your sheet? I told you to write down everything that's on the character sheet. And he said I didn't want to do that because it was going to take too much time. And I'm like, you were creating an entire ass character. It's going to take time regardless. You may as well do it perfectly. So that was one thing. And Jake, on the other hand, he was impatient to the point, like, he wasn't impatient, per se. He was creating his character, but the problem was he doesn't like to, because I've run him in a few D&D games, and he doesn't like his character to have a weakness that he has to overcome, essentially. So he likes to have the badass, the cool badass character, essentially. But that cool badass character can't have any major flaws that will hamper him in being the cool badass character. And basically what happened is, when he drew his cards to get the die type for his attributes for Deadlands, he ended up drawing the Black Joker. And if you guys don't know, good red Joker good, Black Joker bad. That's how the rules are in Deadlands. So he drew the Black Joker, which meant he got some sort of mutation. And that mutation was, he essentially turned into a vampire. Not the whole blood-sucking vampire deal, but basically radiation in the world affected him to the point where he can't stay out in the sun too long, or else he could die. So that was, that in his brain was too big of an obstacle to overcome for his character. So he decided, nope, scrap that character. And he essentially just stole one of my other players' characters from an older campaign. And it irritated me quite a bit. But we were at 10:30. At this point, it was probably close to 11:30, maybe midnight. And I was like, fine, you know what? Fine. I just want to get this game started. Well, actually, probably wasn't 11:30 midnight. It was probably close to 10:30, 11 o'clock now that I think about it. But still, I want to just get this game started. I do not like starting games past midnight, because after midnight, my brain, whether I'm caffeinated, awake, whatever, my brain after midnight starts to go cuckoo. He starts to go, hoo, 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 and shit just pops out of there that I don't know what's going on. But if I'm doing something beforehand, then my brain is just focused on that. So if I started DMing beforehand, my brain will be focused on being a good enough DM to make this game enjoyable. So we get all the character creation done. And admittedly, this campaign brought upon some of the funniest fucking moments I have ever had in my time being a DM. You know, I've been DMing for 7 years, 8 years now, and this has brought upon some of the funniest moments I've ever dealt with. And that's largely due to the fact that the two other guys that were brought in without me knowing, they created some of the funniest fucking characters I have ever seen in a game. Like, I could tell it was they were gonna be funny because they created characters and did not give a shit what happened when they rolled the dice. Or they purposely went for things that they could have fun with, and that's when I knew they were going to be fun at my table. So what had happened was one of the guys, I can't remember their names right now, but we're just going guy number one, guy number two. Guy number one, I can't remember exactly what he rolled, but he played a character that was essentially he wasn't a snob, but he had no time for stupidity and was smart. And guy number two, he created a character where he had a hindrance where he idolized someone, essentially. Like, I think it was obligation or something like that. I can't remember. But it was, the hindrance basically tells you the more points you put it, like, I think it's loyalty or something like that. I can't remember the exact, I can't remember the exact hindrance, but it was basically, the description of it along the lines was, you idolize a close friend, public figure, or hero, and you try to be as much like them as possible and help them at all. And, you know, you basically idolize them. You know, you simp them in today's language, I guess. And he, thankfully, and it just so happened that with Dustin's character, I have a thing with his character specifically, where his character is the same exact character in every campaign, basically. Every one of my campaigns has the same exact character for Dustin. His name is Ryan Brick, and he has been in every single one of my Deadlands campaigns. And I've managed to craft a story around it where he is a known hero in the world of Deadlands, because every one of my campaigns takes place in the same universe. You know, I don't have a multiverse of Deadlands. You know, I don't have a Deadlands multiverse yet. But yeah, his character is well known throughout the Deadlands universe. And so guy number two decided that he was going to idolize Dustin's character, and it was some of the funniest shit ever. And the stories I'm gonna tell, I'll have to tell if I ever get Dustin on here, which I'm sure I'll get him on here eventually, because it's far funnier when he explained. It's a lot better with him here to explain it, because he looks back on it as fondly as I do. But yeah, so they did great for not ever playing Deadlands. They actually did really good. It was really just Jake and Tony that I had any issues with, and that was just because they were purposely trying to do dumb shit. Like guy number 1 and 2, they created dumb characters. Well, air quotes dumb characters. They created what was essentially joke characters because they knew that they were never going to be playing under me as a DM again. You know, I had literally just met them, and they knew that this was going to be a one-time thing, so they wanted to have fun with it. And so they created joke characters, but they still took the game as seriously as possible. You know, obviously, like I said, there were comedic moments and shit like that because their characters were inherently supposed to be comedic. But, you know, they didn't do stuff that was going to intentionally damper the group. You know, they didn't do stuff that was going to be bad for the group. Tony and Jake, on the other hand, definitely did. Jake was too concerned on his character dying, which, fair point, I guess. Deadlands is literally considered a meat grinder game where me as the DM is supposed to try and kill your character. But he was so concerned with his character dying that he didn't do enough, in my opinion, to help the group out when need be. Tony was trying to be funny. Tony was purposely trying to do shit to get a laugh. And that's something I don't necessarily like at my table. Like, yeah, sure, I'll allow people to do stupid shit at my table, you know. Somebody wants to try and, you know, climb up onto a roof and then jump onto the dragon's back, do a double front flip and stab him in the neck, stuff like that. I'll let them do stuff like that because you're still actively going towards the same goal of the party, and it's not a detriment to your party, really. But Tony did shit like there was the story of this one shot was they were in this town that was the people were constantly being abducted by cultists, essentially, and then being, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? They were basically being assimilated into this cultist group, and they just kept going back and taking more people from this town. So the group is in this town trying to figure out what's going on, and on top of this hill, they spotted a cultist that didn't look like any of the other cultists that they had seen before. They spotted this cultist who was just standing on top of this hill. And so Tony decides it would be the smart idea while the rest of the group is like, the dude wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there. The rest of the group was looking back at him, stuff like that. Tony decided the best idea would be to charge at him without saying a thing. He charged at him and tried to fight him without saying a thing. He literally just said, I charge at him. And even everybody at the table was like, you dumb motherfucker, why would you do that? And he was trying to be funny and cool at the same time. You know, the whole dumb barbarian thing, except his character wasn't a dumb barbarian. His character was just a guy that used a sword, essentially. But, yeah, so he just charged without a second thought at the guy. And me being fed up with his bullshit up to this point, had this cultist guy be super fucking powerful, specifically towards him, and essentially just back slapped him and he rolled down the hill. So nobody else went to fight the fucking cultist because they're not stupid. And so he did stuff like that just didn't help the group at all and was intentionally there to just try and be funny. And it didn't end up being funny, it just ended up being a thing that happened. And eventually it got to the point where I was trying to end this session. Like it got to the point where Dustin was sitting next to me texting me like, you gotta end this. You gotta end this session, dude. It's going way too far off the rails. And I'm looking at him like, I know, but I can't, because at that point in the story for the adventure, like, we were literally right before the point of them storming the cultist hideout to finally take them out. And so I couldn't really I couldn't end the story there because it was a one shot and I wanted to finish it. So I kept going. This went on for like another hour and a half until finally they ended up, Todd's character ended up, like, he had a mutation too. Todd's character had a mutation where if any part of him, you know, his arms, legs, torso, stuff like that, if any part of him gets dealt 5 wounds to it, which would be considered mauled, and it's just gone at that point, he would explode. That was his mutation. If anything got damaged, if any part of his body got 5 wounds taken to it, he would explode, essentially. And that was normally just supposed to be he just goes pop, essentially. But I needed to end this session, so what I did was thankfully what he thought was that if you know, he took 5 wounds to a body part, it was a nuclear explosion, essentially. You know, if he turned into a fucking nuke. And it worked in my favor because I was like, yeah, that's exactly what happens. Yep, that is exactly 100% what happens. I agree. So what he decided to do was run into the cultist hideout and just let them stab him, essentially, until they dealt 5 wounds to one of his body parts. And I'm like, he already thinks this is what it's going to happen. I need to end this. So he blew up in a nuclear explosion and the entire cultist Colt died. And that was the end of that session. Me and Dustin went home. Everybody else hung out for the night, and that was not a. It was a fun night, but it was one of the worst one of the worst games I think I've ever run in my life, just because of how much bullshit went on. You know, it's a combination of people joining that I didn't know were gonna join. It was a combination of impatience in character creation. It was, combine all of that with the fact that, two of my players weren't taking it seriously at all, other than, there was one player that wasn't taking it seriously at all and purposely trying to do stupid stuff. And then there was another one who's taking it a little too seriously, even though he was never going to end up playing that character again. And so it was fun, but definitely one of the worst games I've ever DM'd. But that still does not compare to the worst game I have ever DM'd in my life. And it was almost with the same it was with two of the same people. Tony and Jake were still a part of it. And so was Dustin, but this time Jacob was there too. And then there was like one or two other people that were there. I think it was just one other person that was there. And so we went there. I created another one shot. Dustin had a character made already that he had never been able to play past level 1, so it was still level 1. Jacob had created a character beforehand. I had created a character for Tony already. So Jake and this other guy number 1, didn't have any characters. What they didn't realize is that character creation in D&D as well takes at least an hour to put your character together. Nobody knew that. And this was the day after we graduated, too. No, this was the same day we graduated. Everybody else that we graduated with went to like the after party that the school put on for everybody. Me and my friends decided that we wanted to go play D&D. So that's what we did, and I knew everybody that was going to be in the group. This time I knew that there were going to be multiple people in this group. I knew exactly how many people there were going to be in this group, and there were no surprises dropped on me this time. So that was good. But guy number 1, nobody actually realized how long it takes to create a D&D character. Like I said, it takes at least an hour per character. So, depending on what you're doing, if you're playing a fighter, joke is that it's basic, but it's true. Fighter's pretty basic. But, both these guys wanted to play magic characters, essentially. Jake wanted to play a blood mage, and guy number 1, I think, wanted to play something else, but I can't remember what it was. I think it was a fighting class of some sort. But it was going to take a while for them to create their character, and unfortunately, guy number 1 couldn't spend the night like the rest of us. So guy number 1 ended up having to leave early before he was even able to play the game. So then the group was just down to me, Tony, Jake, Jacob, and Dustin. That was the group. And so this group I had run previously before. I had run them in Deadlands. So I knew what I was getting into. Basically the game started, everybody was having fun. Basic starting, everyone was in a tavern. Jacob and Dustin knew each other. And then Jake and Tony didn't know anybody else. So basically, it started off incredibly weird and ever so slightly irritating, because Tony also did not take this game seriously at all. He has a very bad habit of not taking anything seriously as far as D&D goes. Even the games that he has run beforehand, he never took seriously. And I mean, it's fine to not take the game too seriously. You shouldn't take it too seriously, because after all, it is just a game. But like every game, you got to take it at least somewhat seriously for you to be able to have a good time, or else you're just not, or else either, you might be having a good time, but nobody else is having a good time. So you gotta have some level of seriousness when you play a game. But basically, this game, like I said, this game started off in a tavern. A few people knew each other, some people didn't. Tony's character, because Jacob was playing a female character at this time. I can't remember what exactly he was. But Jacob was playing a female character at this time. Tony was not. He was playing a male character. And Tony decided the first thing he was going to do was slap Jacob's character's ass. That was the first thing he decided to do. Lo and behold, Jacob's character backslapped him into fucking oblivion. And when he tried to run at Jacob's character to fight him, the bartender rolled a natural 20 and threw a dagger that stuck in the hand of Tony's character. It stuck in his hand so well that he couldn't get it out. Eventually, guards came and took him off to jail because of a decision that he made. So his character was essentially out of the fucking game right at the beginning of the game for about 2 hours. He realized that he was going to be out of the game for a while because he had never introduced himself to any of these characters, to anybody else's characters. He didn't introduce his character to anybody else's characters, first of all. He didn't introduce himself and immediately got himself arrested, so none of these guys had any reason to get him out of jail. So he was stuck in jail until I was able to figure out a fucking reason for these guys to get him out of jail without knowing who he was. They didn't even know his name at the time. So these guys, so the game still goes. Tony realizing that his character is essentially fucking useless for the next however long because of his own dumbass decision, he got a little upset, and then he turned around and started playing fucking Smash Bros, I think. Or he started playing Bloodborne because he was bored. And I'm like, dude, your dumbass is the one who got arrested at the beginning of the game. You cannot put this on me. That is your fault. So they ended up getting him out of jail. Dustin's character was fucking charismatic as shit and ended up just walking into the jail and met a guard named Tim. Tim has now become a running character in all of my all of my D&D campaigns, and basically just said that, he could go in. He made it through the first guard, didn't make it through the second, wasn't able to persuade him. So that was try number one. Eventually, Jacob's character went in and got him out somehow. I can't remember the exact details. I think he said something about how he wasn't going to press charges, shit like that. And then they ended up going on an adventure where it lasted a total of 2 hours because we ended up having to end the game early because Jake decided to play a blood mage, and blood mages are stupid fucking complicated to play, but they're even more complicated to fucking make. If anyone out there has made a blood mage character, holy fucking shit. Dude needed like 4 sheets of fucking paper to fit all of the stuff that he had onto his fucking character sheet. So we spent probably 2 hours alone on his character alone. And so the mechanics for being a blood mage are very complex. And there were points where we were spending like 20 minutes alone on his character alone, trying to figure out what fucking attacks he can use without damaging the party and stuff like that. And it was so Star Spangled fucking complicated. So we ended up ending the game early because nothing was happening. Legit nothing fucking happened. They got into like 2 fights, and it was so boring that I was actually falling asleep. I mean, granted, I will give them this. That was around the time that I was starting to stop drinking pop as much as I had. And I basically went cold fucking turkey from pop to try and decrease my goddamn sugar intake from pop. So I didn't have any caffeine, or at least enough caffeine to keep me too awake. But I knew as long as I was focused and having fun, I was going to stay awake. The problem was this was so fucking boring that I couldn't stay awake. These guys as characters did not do anything of fucking note except for Todd's character getting arrested for for slapping Jacob's character's ass and then getting the shit kicked out of him by a bartender. And that was it. Those were the most memorable moments of the game. Like, it wasn't it was a bad game in the sense that just nothing happened. Like, those are the only moments I can remember from the game. Because, I mean, I don't have this adventure anymore. It was a custom one-shot that I created, and I think it got lost during when I was moving out of my old place. So I just can't get over how fucking boring it was. And the fact that, you know, Todd, he was pissed at me because because of his own actions, and then he just decided to completely disregard the entire fucking game and anything that was happening. Like, he didn't even know he was getting, like, out of jail because he was so focused on playing a fucking PlayStation game because his dumbass got arrested at the beginning of the game and made himself fucking useless. So it's a bad, like I said, it's a bad game in a sense that it was just boring. And there were some things that irritated the shit out of me. Like him getting himself arrested right at the beginning of the game and then blaming it on me, and then turning around and playing Bloodborne for fucking 2 hours, not paying attention to the game whatsoever. So and then getting mad at me when he didn't know information about stuff that took place while he was playing fucking Bloodborne for 2 hours. And it irritated the shit out of me. And the fact that it was also, you know, nobody knew how long it was going to take to create a D&D character, especially a fucking blood mage. So we didn't get started till late, and then everybody after we ended was like, wow, that ended early. That was, I mean, it was good and all for what we played, but wow, that was short. And I'm like, I didn't have anything to work with. Nobody gave me anything to work with. Like, even Dustin and Jacob, my two most seasoned players at my table. Like, they are the two most seasoned players at my table. Like, I run them on adventures with just the two of them a lot. So, like, they know how I run games, and even they couldn't provide me anything to work with because nobody else was doing anything. And so it was a game that was bad because it was just so boring. I didn't have anything to work with. Like, I like to think that my improv skills are pretty decent when it comes to D&D, but holy shit, I still need at least something to work with. You know, you can't just sit there in fucking silence and expect me to pull something out of my ass. That's not what you can do. I can't pull something out of my ass. Okay? I cannot pull an amazing fucking moment out of my ass. That is not how DMs work. Okay, we create story, we give you a platform to mold your own story around the world we created. And if you don't give us anything, we can't do our jobs and create a better world for you to be involved in. And so it was just, like I said, I can't stress enough how boring it was. It was so incredibly fucking boring. And I'll have to get Dustin and or Jacob on here to talk about it too, because they knew more about what was going on than I did, essentially. Because I kept zoning out, I kept tuning out of how fucking boring this was. And maybe it sounds like I'm being a bit petty, you know, maybe it sounds like I'm just complaining a lot. And maybe it sounds like I'm just complaining about, you know, Todd and Jake, like this whole video was just because of Todd and Jake. But the fact of the reality is, I don't run very many new people in my games. I have the same group that I run in my games constantly, that being Dustin, Jacob, Jake, and at the time, Todd. Those were the four people that I ran in my groups regularly. So that's where most of my stories come from. Now, obviously, I'm running Dustin and Jacob in another campaign. There's going to be another campaign for the podcast that Dustin and Jacob are going to be in, as well as one or two other people that I'm trying to figure out who's going to be in it. So it is just so star-spangled fucking fucked, you know. And it's like I said, it sounds like I'm complaining a lot, because I am definitely complaining. But it's not just about these two guys, you know. These are just the two worst stories I have from gaming. At least being a DM, you know. Thankfully, I've been pretty blessed to have DM'd a lot of very good games. You can ask Dustin and Jacob at any time. They will always tell you that my games are fun as shit, and that I am a fairly decent dungeon master. But yeah, I can only work with what I'm given, essentially, and it's it is what it is. That's how DMs work. I'm sure there are some DMs out there that, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people out there that listen to this and are going to be like, well, this is what I would have done in that situation, or you should have done this in that situation. And it's like, sorry, I keep hitting my mic. And it's like, I don't care. You're sure you may have handled it differently. It's done in the past, though. I handled it differently than you. There's gonna be people that are probably thinking, oh, this dude's just bitching and whining about stuff. If he was a better DM, then this stuff wouldn't happen. It's like, okay, sure, maybe, but we'll never know now, because at the time I wasn't a very good DM. Like, at the time I was just starting out DMing, essentially. The Deadlands one took place well after I was DMing, but the D&D one was only 2 years after I had started DMing. Like, I was still a new DM. So it was, I don't know, man. It was rough. But though I do have more bad D&D stories. Thankfully, like I said, most of them were not me as the DM. Most of them are as me being a player. But I want to get more people in to talk about these with, because most of my bad stories as a player come from the main group that I play with. That being, Renavion, Tyler's mom, aunt, and nephew, cousin, not nephew, cousin. So I got those stories, and I want to try and bring on one of those, at least one of them. I can probably get Renavion on here. I could probably get Tyler on here. So I want to talk about those with them. And then, I'll bring Dustin and Jacob on to talk about these stories with them, and, how they personally felt when that happened, because they were, at least, Dustin was there for both of them. Jacob's heard many stories about that night. So I do want to bring those guys on to kind of rehash this. But, speaking of Tyler, me and Tyler do have something in the works. If you guys don't know who Tyler is, he goes by Evergreen Chrysalis, I think, on YouTube. I can't remember his fucking name on YouTube, but he is the stepson to the one and only Renavion. If you guys watched my interview with Renavion, I recommend doing that. It is a great interview with him, but their personalities are almost exactly the same. There are some differences, but we got something in the works coming for you guys. Also, before I go, I do want to mention that I do have new merch out in my Streamlabs shop. I have added an animal bandana with the Canadian flag, and I have added a baby shirt up to 18, the max size up to 18 to 24 months, a women's crew neck, and a men's athletic shirt. The women's goes up to 2X, men's goes up to 3X, and like I said, the baby shirts go up to 18 to 24 month old babies. All of those can be found at my Streamlabs merch shop. They are all very good designs. The shirts have have my character on them, and like I said, the bandana is a Canadian flag bandana. So I want to thank you guys all again for tuning in to this very complainy, bitchy episode of RPG Speak. More things to come in the future. I will have another retro episode out for you guys very soon. And yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I can't wait to be in your guys' ear next time. So have a good day, everybody. Have a good day.